In Ohio today, 1 out of every 6 jobs is related in some way to producing components, products, or services related to the automobile industry. Besides providing so many of us with a living, the motor vehicle, directly or indirectly, influences practically everything we do and everything around us. Today, the automobile dominates our habits, our institutions, and our lives. It's hard to believe that shortly before the turn of the century, the automobile had not yet become part of the Ohio heritage. The automobiles that were in existence in the early 1900s were almost literally horseless carriages. To ride in one was a privilege and an experience to remember once it got underway. Then as now, new models made the old ones out of date overnight. In those days, self-starter meant start it yourself, and that was only one of the many chores the proud owner had to perform in getting underway. But that primitive state of affairs didn't last long. Once the idea got around that the horse could be replaced by an engine, young men everywhere went to work on it, nowhere with greater enthusiasm or more ingenuity than in Ohio. No one knows for certain how many brands of automobiles were manufactured in the state. There were several hundred, certainly. Cleveland alone can account for 81 different makes. Here at the Western Reserve Historical Society in Cleveland, the Frederick Crawford Auto Museum is a living record of our automobile heritage. On display here, usually in excellent restored condition, are automobiles from the oldest closed car known to exist on the North American continent, built in 1895, to this 1932 all-aluminum Peerless, the last car built in Cleveland. Among the Ohio-made cars to be seen here are the Toledo Steamer, the Baker Electric, the Roush & Lang Electric, the American Motor Carriage, the Columbus Buggy, the White Steamers, the Stearns Knight, the Royal Tourist, the Peerless, the Templar, and the Winton. In the roll call of automotive pioneers, one of the greatest names is Alexander Winton, the first man to sell an automobile. That event occurred in Cleveland on March the 24th, 1898. The car Mr. Winton sold that day to a professor from Oberlin College is now on exhibit in the National Museum in Washington. Winton not only made fine automobiles, he also worked hard to promote them. To demonstrate their dependability, he drove one of his earliest cars from Cleveland to New York City in the record time of 78 hours and 43 minutes. This feat caused a national sensation. So did the Winton Bullet, the fastest thing on wheels, until October 25th, 1902. That was the day Ohioan Barney Oldfield drove Henry Ford's racer, the 999, for the first time. He beat Winton that day, possibly because it was Barney's first race and he didn't know how to operate the brakes. Barney Oldfield, his cigar, and the 999 became American institutions. They were crowd thrillers at the turn of the century, and no wonder. Barney Oldfield and his racers, particularly the 999, dramatized the automobile to a skeptical America. 60 miles an hour, which the 999 could do when Barney drove, was as incredible to that generation as traveling at the speed of sound was to the next. On a hot day in August, 1898, Alex Winton had a visitor, a skeptical electric engineer from Warren, Ohio.
I don't know, Winton. That suspension system doesn't look so good to me.
Well, that is good enough to carry me from here to New York in
78 hours, 43 minutes. But that was a year ago. You can't live on that stunt the rest of your life.
Young man, it wasn't a stunt. It was a demonstration of the dependability of Winton automobiles.
Yeah. How much horsepower do you say she develops?
5 horsepower.
5 horsepower, eh? And that's all you can get out of it?
It's better than anybody else can do right now.
What do you mean, right now?
I mean with the gasolines we have right now. When the oil people understand that gasoline will outsell coal oil one of these days, maybe they'll give us a better fuel.
Until then, you'll just blame the fuel for poor performance.
Look, son, if you think you can build a better automobile, why don't you try it?
You know, Winton, I think I'll just do that.
Yeah, well, let me know how you make out, Mr. What did you say your name was?
Packard. J.W. Packard. And I won't have to let you know, Mr. Winton. My customers will tell you.
James Packard went back to Warren, and in this building made the first car to bear his name. It had wire wheels, a patent leather dashboard, 12 horsepower, and 3-speed transmission. The Packard became one of the great automobiles of all time, the prestige car of America. The Packard slogan, "Ask the man who owns one," grew to be as famous as the car. That happened this way, back in 1900.
Mr. Packard, there's a man out front says he wants to buy a car.
I can't see him. I'm busy.
But he's come a long way to talk to you. He looks important.
If he wants to know anything about a Packard, tell him, tell him to ask the man who owns one.
Another famous name in motoring is that of the White brothers of Cleveland. They started making steam-powered automobiles in 1900. The car burned gasoline in order to convert water in the boiler to steam. The White steamers were the luxury cars of their day. They were distinguished by their size and elegant coachwork, in addition to their great power, 15 horses, and their reliability, aluminum body, and hand-buffed leather upholstery. The Whites became the first official presidential cars. President Taft and his family rode in a white touring car. So did Teddy Roosevelt. And Chief Justice Charles Evans Hughes. And Mrs. John Cuneo, a socialite who was the most famous woman driver of her day, and something of a hot rodder, they say. Seldom in the history of technological progress did anything develop as fast as did the automobile. This car was the hit of 1904, the one-cylinder curved dash Oldsmobile. It sold for $650 and was the subject of Gus Edwards' song of 1905. That was 1904. Only 8 years later, in 1912, this was the car Oldsmobile was offering to an eager public. A 6-cylinder, 60-horsepower monster with 42-inch wheels that allowed the car to clear the bumpiest backwoods roads. By that time, automobiles had ceased to be playthings of the irresponsible adventurers. They were now accepted in the best of circles. There was stiff competition among manufacturers to be the first with the most elegance. Some of the great cars of the times were the Royal Tourist, the Cadillac, the Packard, the Peerless, and of course the White, which by that time had a 30-horsepower, 4-cylinder gasoline engine. Between 1915 and 1916, the number of automobiles manufactured almost doubled. In 1 year, production leaped from 800,000 to 1.5 million. These cars and their contemporaries had already begun to change the way of life in Ohio. The streets of Cleveland looked like this in 1916. And in Toledo, the scene was much the same. But out in the country, the going was still difficult. It's hard to say who had the hardest time, the car, the passengers, or the horses, or the helpful neighbors. Henry Ford is credited with developing the assembly line technique for manufacturing automobiles. It was soon employed to turn out major parts, among them were the wheels. It was in plants like this that modern manufacturing systems began to evolve. Tires and inner tubes, practically all of which came from Akron's rubber companies, were also turned out by mass production methods. Trucks became big business in the early 1900s, and among the pioneers was the White steamer, sold in Denver in 1900. A few years later, the White plant in Cleveland was turning out trucks that set high standards for quality and durability in the commercial vehicle industry. In 1907, John North Willis, an automobile salesman from Elmira, New York, traveled all the way to Indianapolis to see why Overland Company couldn't deliver cars as fast as he could sell them. He ended up owning the company, and in 1911 he moved it to Toledo, Ohio, where it has been ever since. The Willys Overland and later the Willys Knight were great names in the automobile world, just as their successor, the Jeep, is today. Any history of automobiles in Ohio must include the name of Ned Jordan, an advertising copywriter who got into the automobile business in Cleveland. But Jordan was not only an outstanding motor car, it revolutionized automobile advertising. Before Ned Jordan came on the scene, advertisements for automobiles were often extravagant in their claims and somewhat more colorful than the circumstances actually warranted. The Vulcan Company of Painesville, Ohio, for example, claimed the Vulcan announcement came like a thunderbolt from a clear sky and was, in fact, the world's greatest light car. The Columbus Buggy Company claimed their electric would take you anywhere in cozy comfort as fast as any city ordinance will permit and at not much more cost than streetcar fare. The Yale of Toledo, the Beau Brummel of the road, was claimed to be a triumph of mechanical perfection. The Stoddard Dayton ads made it clear that this car was not for the common man. And the 1915 Winton claimed to be the closed car so necessary for the successful social season. Ned Jordan, however, changed the look and tone of automobile advertising, and his Somewhere West of Laramie ad for the Jordan Playboy became an all-time classic of the advertising industry. In the 1920s, powerful and elegant automobiles like these had set the stage for a breakthrough in automotive progress. Engines were too big and too heavy in relation to their power. Something had to be done to improve performance, but that depended on developing better fuel. In Charles Kettering's Delco Laboratories in Dayton, a research engineer, Thomas Midgley, had been trying for many months to find a chemical which could be added to gasoline to prevent engine knock. Knock meant pre-ignition, loss of power, lower efficiency. Kettering stopped in from time to time to see how things were going.
Well, got any leads yet, Tom?
Well, nothing concrete, just wild guesses. I've got one of them about ready to go.
Oh, what's that?
Well, it's born of desperation, I guess, but I got to thinking the trailing arbutus plant blooms even when it's covered with snow. Now, do you know why that is?
Well, it has a red leaf, hasn't it?
Yeah.
I suppose it absorbs heat.
Well, now, that's my reasoning. And I thought if we could find some kind of a dye that would make gasoline red, it might somehow do something. I told you I was getting desperate.
What are you going to use for dye?
Well, I asked Fred what to use. All he could think of was iodine. He gave me some, and I diluted it. Now, we'll see what color we get.
Oh, go right ahead. Oh, that's not very red. Put in some more. Oh, that's pretty good.
All right, let's see what happens.
By the merest chance, Midgley had stumbled onto the one element that could stop engine knock. It had nothing to do with the color of the gasoline. It was the iodine itself that did it. That led to the discovery of ethyl gasoline, which first went on sale in Dayton in 1923. And it was the start of a new era in the design and performance of motor cars. An era of sleek, streamlined beauty, of effortless power and luxurious comfort. An era that promises a future as colorful as the past for the automobile in the Ohio heritage.